Chapter 27. The Princess Sulimia. She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's bright of day and night meet in her aspect and her eyes. Hebrew Melodies, Byron. When I recovered myself, Altafora was by my side. "I appreciate your keenly awakened feelings," said he, aroused by the sight of your national flag and the tones of your grand national anthem. "'Tis truly an inspired lyric outburst of the purest patriotism enshrined in the hearts of a great and free-born nation. The high honor you have bestowed on me by this magnificent reception," I replied, "and which the monarchs of earth might be proud to receive, I accept as a tribute to the greatest republic of earth, the home of liberty, the asylum of the oppressed, and the hope of our nations. Oh, tell me, shall I ever see my native land, my home, kindred, and friends again? And at times sad thoughts come over my soul that I have trod the soil, breathed the earth, and gazed on the skies of earth for the last time." "Dismiss these sad thoughts from your mind," he replied. "The same skies, the same stars that shine over this our world, shine over also yours, although so widely separated from each other by these awful abysses of space. I promise you that, whenever you so desire, I will escort you through the vast realms again, back to your native world and home. In meantime, rest assured that you are among true friends, upon whose kindness and hospitality you can in good faith rely." He warmly pressed my hand. "How did you secure my flag, which I planted on the summit of my icy prison? I deemed it lost long ago in the waters of earth's polar seas." "We found it floating amid its fragments. I brought it hither on my return as a memento of the great service you rendered me, and as a royal trophy from your world, which I felt would gladden your heart to see floating on the breezes of Mars." "And the national anthem of my country, whose grand harmonies rolled over land and sea, rising even to the very skies of this other world? In the delirium of your illness you talked of friends and bygone scenes. You seemed to hear sounds from home, so dear to us all. You oft sang old songs, many of which were beautiful. Really, my friend, I had no idea you were so fine a singer. We could not understand the words, of course, when you sang your Star-Spangled Banner with such force and feeling. We felt it must be your national anthem. Being somewhat of a musician myself, I copied it from your lips and gave it to the leaders of our military bands. We Martians have national hymns and anthems, but deem it no flattery when I pronounce your Star-Spangled Banner unsurpassed by anything of its kind on this planet. Whoever of your earth-born poets was the author deserves to be immortalized for all time." "His name is already immortalized in the hearts of the American people," I replied. "The Star-Spangled Banner is played on every national celebration of the United States of America, and its strains have resounded over every land and sea on earth's broad domain." We were seated in a beautiful sea chariot resembling the illustrations of that in which the mythological sea god Neptune rides over the waves. Its prow was surmounted by a figure of the ocean monarch armed with his trident, drawn by his steeds, half horse, half fish, with silver scales, coral eyes, golden manes, and brazen hoofs. It was surrounded by a band of young tritons blowing their conch shells. Around these were bands of oceanids mounted on sea unicorns and blowing their stritherons. It is evident that the Martians, as well as the terrestrians, had a mythology, and its striking resemblance to our old Grecian, surprised me. "Humanity," said Dr. Hamoval, "is the same on whatever planet it may happen to be created, and find its home, and all its intellectual manifestations and ideal conceptions are, in the main, similar, though varied somewhat by their natural surroundings. Long before your earth-born races were created, our old Martian races had passed through their periods of sun, moon, and star worship, deification of natural objects, heroes, and ancestors, although they never sank to the gross idolatry of yours. The early Martian ages of poetry and romance had also their mythological conceptions and ideals, which were more or less associated with religious worship. These idealities are beautiful, And like you, we still retain them as pleasing and graceful creations of the young and vivid poetic imagination, although of course they are wholly divested of the powerful religious elements they once held in the hearts of men. The fleet with yachts the fleet with the yachts and the Zangulicia leading the van were sailing down the bay. Our chariot now drew near the shore, which was clothed with a dense forest to the water's edge. From its depths a little river flowed into the bay. Its banks were lined with giant trees unknown on earth, their trunks flowering up like ships' masts and crowned with dense masses of bright red or green foliage, with scarlet or bright yellow fruits. The sward was clothed with strange and fantastic shrubbery. Strains of sweet music, like the sounds of harps and violas, issued from the leafy depths. The tritons and ocean tides blew answering blasts from their shells and citherns. Our chariot passed through their parting ranks and paused in its course. And now came a pageant so fairy-like and beautiful, so chaste and classical in every detail, as seemed like a dream of oriental romance. From the depths of those leafy bowers and floating on the rippling waters came a band of young maidens, attired as Nereides, sea-nymphs, and mermaids, mounted on dolphins, physetters, and other strange fishes, whose brilliant colors made the watery expanse appear like an emblazoned field of gorgeous tapestry. They wore crowns, necklaces, bracelets, and girdles of coral. They held their little mirrors in their hands, combing their long green locks, or scooping up little fishes in their nets and playfully petting each other with astrians, sea hedgehogs, porcupines, jellyfish, etc., amid peals of merry laughter. Following them came a band of young girls attired as naiads, potamaids, and linymiads, nymphs of lakes, rivers, and streams, mounted on giant nautiluses, which their sail-like paddles and shells of the color of silver or pearl, on chetodons and pipefish, throwing up jets and sprays of water from their bottle-shaped mouths. Some were mounted on great green-backed turtles, or giant medusae, with glassy discs and tentacles like strings of beads. Their riders were guiding them with bridles of twisted seaweed, lashing them with their rattan whips, blowing reed pipes and flaglots, and shooting at each other balls of clay from pitch elder pop guns, throwing nets over each other's heads or tossing showers of water over each other from their urn-shaped tulips. Trumpet lilies and pitcher plants emit a perfect revelry of fun, frolic, and laughter, which made the woods ring. In the center of this merry circle floated a magnificent Arcadia, or pearl-shaped barge, drawn by a flock of snow-white swans, their delicate silken reins held by 6-winged auroras, mounted on the prow, which was supported on the upraised wings of carved white falcons. Along the gunwales of the barge stood rows of birds, white and gray herons, scarlet flamingos, crested hoopies, snow-white osprey, and other birds of gorgeous plumage unknown on earth. Above the auroras stood beautiful Horai, or goddess of the season, crowned with chaplets and bearing cornucopias of fruit, flower, and grain. Behind these were the Graces and Tescopores, crowned with garlands and gracefully dancing to the sound of lutes. Groups of Hesperides, holding golden apples in their hands, mingled with the Muses, bearing myrtles, palms, and roses. Behind the birds stood rows of Euterus, Eratos, and Melipontes, attired in white robes and playing delicious music on harps, lyres, and citherns. High over the deck, the upper leaf of the bivalve Arcadian hung, like a great canopy, its arched dome reflecting splendid prismatic colors. On its summit, which was decorated with the royal coat of arms of Mandal Ultima, stood a magnificent white and gray eagle, looking calmly down with his kingly eyes on the beautiful scene. As our chariot drew near, the bands of Nereides and Naiads ceased their sport and parted their ranks. The swans uttered sweet notes of welcome as we drew alongside and stepped on the deck. Passing through the ranks of the Graces and Euteripes, who ceased their music and dancing, we approached a splendid divan, hung with gauzy curtains of amber and pearl, suspended from the beaks of birds of paradise. On either side stood a group of beautiful young girls, attired as Psyches. Over their heads floated a cloud of tiny hummingbirds, their fluttering wings resembling aurorae of rainbow hues. As we drew near, the curtains parted, and the living vision of my dreams appeared. A young girl of form and countenance so transcendently lovely, of beauty almost divine, she seemed an angel wafted from paradise. "My sister, the Princess Sulimia," said the prince. As I knelt and kissed her hand, which the haughtiest monarch of earth would have been proud to press, she glanced at me from beneath the softly veiled lids of her dark and magnificent eyes, while a glow of surprise and pleasure mantled her cheeks, as in a voice low and sweet she bade me welcome. It was difficult to describe the beauty of this young Martian princess by any aesthetic standards with which we terrestrians are familiar, for the Martian ideal belongs to a superior order and is elevated on a higher plane than ours, and this is all the more apparent from the fact that our usually accepted standards are more or less fallacious, being founded upon erroneous and often crude conceptions of the beautiful in nature and art. Many so-called aesthetic writers have attempted to formulate and classify what they call their ideals into standards corresponding to fanciful conception of their own, and designate these ideals as the spiritual, the intellectual, and the expressional and emotional, and arrange the physical beauty of mere form, color, etc., into what they call classical, passional, voluptual, etc. This is particularly seen in the meretricious French aesthetic school. To attempt the formulations of rules or models of beauty or grace in human beings is as futile as to lay down standards for horses, cattle, birds, flowers, trees, or landscapes. For as the beauties of the animal and the vegetable kingdom of nature display an almost infinite variety, standards are therefore impossible. The ideals of all ages, races, and nations are different from each other. Those of the ancient Assyrians and Babylonians are in striking contrast with those of the ancient Egyptians, those in turn from the Aryans, from those of the Greeks, and so on to the Persians, Arabians, Romans, Teutonics, Goths, Celts, and Franks. Every race and nation of today exhibit the same diversity and have each their own standards or ideals of moral, mental, and physical excellence and beauty, all of which keep pace with their progress in development, cultivation, and refinement. The Princess Selimia was rather above the middle height, her form exquisitely graceful and symmetrical, and her features of that preeminently noble and spiritual order rarely seen amongst the most highly favored of earth-born womankind, and in this respect she strikingly resembled her brother Altafora. Her complexion was of the most delicate orette hue, combined with soft, rich, creamy tint of the tropical magnolia. Her luxuriant hair, which, if unloosed, would have flowed to the ground in great wavy masses, was as deep rich purple, verging on the glossy blackness, mingled with a tinge of red gold, and shimmered with a sparkling luster like the dust of sapphires. Her hands and feet were small for her height, and beautifully molded. Her eyes were magnificent, their color indescribable, resembling that abysmal darkness seen in the fathomless gulfs of the celestial heavens. They were perfect mirrors of her pure and noble soul, vividly displaying or softly veiling its deep and varied emotions. From their depths emanated a resistless magnetism, and her glance now beamed with a gentle radiance, and now flashed with the fire of diamonds. Those beauties of form and feature combined with her refined and elegant bearing, her sweet and ingenuous expression, together with the irresistible fascination surrounding her, united to form one of the most lovely creations among womankind. She was attired in a simple robe of pure white, scarce concealing the exquisite outlines of her form, and without ornament save a little budding flower on her breast. John and the raven were now presented and received graciously. The princess placed a splendid medallion around his neck and caressed the raven. It is needless to add that the former was the proudest and happiest of all the Tantahola war chiefs, and Commodore Jack the proudest and happiest of all ravens on Mars. We sat down engaged in conversation while the swans turned the Arcadia gracefully about and sailed up the river, accompanied by the bands of Nereides and naiads. The princess displayed intellectual endowments of a high order, united with great elegance and polish of manners, all of which were heightened by her sweet amiability and charming sallies of wit. The river narrowed as we advanced. The foliage of the trees formed a complete archway overhead. The mossy banks were thronged with a group of young girls attired as dryads, oreads, oleids, nymphs of woods, grottos, trees, and fountains, Sylvian shepherdesses and huntresses, armed with rustic crooks, bows, and arrows, and playing on panpipes, flutes, and flageolets. Others were dancing under the trees to the sound of lutes, castanets, and cymbals. The woods resounded with their song of welcome. We now entered a beautiful little lake surrounded with hills, woods, and grassy meads. On its bank a magnificent palatial villa of many-colored marbles appeared embowdered among the trees. We drew up and debarked on a broad marble platform, the barge with the princess and her companions passing on to the private entrance of the villa. "This is the Chateau Athelion, the Grand Duke Regnant," said Altafora. We were met by officers of the royal household and escorted up a broad pathway through a grove of trees. The sward was covered with soft and delicate moss, plants and flowers of all varieties of beautiful colors. We entered a splendid portico which, with the villa, was surrounded by lofty fluted columns of variegated marble. The vestibule was paved in mosaic. We were received by the Grand Master of Ceremonies and his aides, and escorted to an inner apartment, from which, after a short time, we passed through a court into the grand audience hall, a magnificent rotunda surmounted by a lofty dome of sky-blue crystal, and surrounded with Gothic arch windows of stained glass, with panels of flamboyant tracery and paintings in fresco. A splendid ornamented gallery, supported on carved columns on different woods, surrounded the walls, which was thronged with crowds of both sexes comprising the elite of the realm, forming a display of beauty and chivalry such as was never seen in the grandest court receptions of earth. Strains of sweet music resounded as we passed through the throngs and ascended as elevated dais hung with royal banners, together with the stars and stripes which had been brought from the admiral's ship. We were received by Alphonse Zangel Thurial, the Arquebusser or Grand Duke Regnant, a noble-looking old man of kingly bearing and venerable appearance. To my surprise and pleasure, the princess now appeared, attired in the robes of her royal rank, and accompanied by a suite of beautiful young ladies. We presented to the assembled throng in accordance with the Martian court ceremonial. The reception concluded, and the audience departed. We retired to the inner apartment in company of the Duke, Princess, and several distinguished guests, and partook a collation. We spent the remainder of the day in the extensive grounds of the villa, which, in the beauty of adornment, immeasurably surpassed the most celebrated palatial surroundings in Europe. The magnificent trees, foliage, and flowers of gorgeous hues, the superb statuary and fountains of many-colored waters, filled me with astonishment and delight. It seemed as if I were in an earthly paradise or fairyland. At the close of the day, after spending a few hours with the royal family, we were escorted to our apartments for the night. The doctor and I had been conversing together a few moments. "I will inform you," said he, "concerning the prince and princess. Helion Zarganuthrava, surnamed the Just and Wise, was the former Raj Indra, or Emperor of Mandel Ultima, and the Raj Ezra, or Queen Amazala, surnamed the Good and Beautiful, was his wife. Of this royal line, which extends back many centuries, they were the noblest, wisest, and best loved that ever ruled this kingdom, and were the parents of the prince and princess, who, in their minds and person, are the perfect counterparts of their father and mother. The queen expired soon after giving birth to her daughter, and our beloved Helion died of a broken heart. His paternal uncle, Athelion, was appointed regent, and he fulfills the duties of his station with eminent dignity and justice. He and the Grand Duchess Lazuda, lately deceased, having lost their only son and daughter in infancy, adopted the prince and princess as their own children, according to the customs of our nation, and no parent could lavish more tender affection on their offspring than the Duke on his royal wards. In a few weeks, the princess will have completed her 18th year and enters her majority, which will be celebrated by appropriate festivities. The prince is now 20. On the following year, he will reach his majority. the Duke will resign his regency, and Altafora, who even at this youthful period gives full promise of being able to sustain the responsibilities of his royal station in a manner worthy of his father, will be crowned Emperor of Mandal Ultima. The doctor now opened one of the windows overlooking the grounds of the villa. "Come out and take a look at our moons," said he. We stepped out on the balcony, and I saw a beautiful little snow-white moon, hardly 1/20th the apparent size of our own satellite, about halfway up to the zenith and sailing across the sky from east to west. "That is the outer moon, Surya Arunya," said he. "It is about 12,500 miles from us, and it completes its orbital revolution, about 90,000 miles, in a little over 30 hours. In a few moments another moon, twice the apparent size of the first, and of a deep blood-red color, rose in the west, skirting low across the horizon in a contrary direction to the other. The rapidity of this motion surprised me. "That is our inner moon, Suda Rohanza. It is about 4,000 miles from our globe, completes its orbital revolution about 36,000 miles in a little over 7 hours, flying at a rate of over 80 miles a minute. As it revolves around our globe nearly 4 times a day, we shall see it in the same position again before sunrise tomorrow." "Mars has never suspected to have a moon," said I, "although the planet has often been searched since the invention of the telescope by many distinguished astronomers of our world. Your planet was called the moonless Mars, although from analogy the existence of a satellite might have been suspected. The honor of this discovery is due to one of our distinguished American astronomers." As the blood-red Phobos swiftly traversed the southern horizon, it had a sinister and ominous look, as if presaging some calamity, and I noticed that the doctor's countenance wore an expression of anxiety as we gazed upon it. Little did I dream of the tragic role that moon would ere long play in the future destiny of Mars. "Look yonder," said the doctor, pointing to the southwest. "Behold your world! 'Tis our evening star. How beautiful!" The tears came to my eyes as I gazed long and earnestly on my dear Mother Earth. Calm, beautiful, sweet, she hung like a gem of purest ray serene in the blue vault of heaven. "Oh, thou lovely orb," I murmured, "thou holdest in thy bosom my home, kindred, friends, and all that are dear to me. Am I indeed forever separated from thee, and can only view thee from afar as thou sheddest thy nightly radiance over these Martian skies?" As these thoughts rose in my soul, they cast a gloom of almost utter desolation over me. I completely broke down, and sobs impossible to restrain burst from my surcharged bosom as I threw myself on the couch.